Okay, thank you, Hazel. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of the Economy and Development Select Committee. My name is Alan Davis, and I'm the Vice Chair of the committee, and I'm taking the chair today because our chair, Paul Pavia, is not available. So if every member of the committee and the officers could introduce themselves, please, so that everybody knows who's speaking, that would be great. So can we start with you, Dave Evans, please? You're on mute, Dave.
I'm Dave Evans. I'm County Councillor for West End Ward in Caldicot, and I'm a member of this committee.
I'll go next if you like, Alan. Brian Strong, I'm the County Councillor for Usk and a member of this committee.
Shall I go next, Chair?
Yes, please, Richard.
I'm Councillor Richard Roden, member for Dixton with Osbaston Ward in Monmouth and member of this committee.
Thank you, Richard. I think Councillor Debbie's having a few problems again. So if the officers could introduce themselves, please.
Good morning all, I'm Mark Hand. I'm the head of placemaking, housing, highways and flooding.
Thank you, Mark.
Good morning, I'm Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning in Monmouthshire.
Thank you, Craig.
Hi, I'm Rachel Lewis, Planning Policy Manager for Monmouthshire.
Thank you, Rachel.
And I'm Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager with Monmouthshire.
Thank you. Councillor Debbie's obviously having a few technical problems, but I'm sure he'll join us later. The next item on the agenda is apologies. Have we got any apologies, Hazel?
No, Chair, we've got apologies from the Chair, which we received in advance, and I've just had two apologies from Councillor Becker and Councillor Feakins.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest as and when, members. And the next item on the agenda is the public open forum, but I understand we have no members of the public with us this morning, Hazel?
No, Chair.
Okay. Item 4 then is the current LDP annual monitoring report. Who's presenting this morning?
It's myself and Craig, Chair.
Okay, Rachel, it's over to you then. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks, Chair. So work's commenced on the preparation of the replacement plan. We're actually reporting the revised delivery agreement and review of evidence base to Council on Thursday. However, there's still a statutory requirement to produce an AMR for the adopted LDP. But this year, given the challenges surrounding COVID, we've been advised by the Minister for Housing and Local Government that we don't need to formally submit to the Welsh Government. Nevertheless, we think it's a really valuable tool, provides important information on how the policies, the strategy, objectives of the current plan are working. And it also helps to inform the replacement plan. So we've prepared the AMR for this year. This is a 6 AMR, which covers the period 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. So the key findings, mainly good news this year, that a lot of the indicators, targets and outcomes have been achieved, which indicates that the plan's policies are performing as intended. There was only 1 red rating this year compared to 3 last year, and that one's around housing delivery, which Craig will touch on in a bit. The improvement in performance is in relation to developments on previously developed land. Basically, the number of permissions on brownfield land's gone up this year compared to last year. And there's also been on Vinegar Hill, which is the last remaining strategic housing site to progress, and we're hoping that will gain permission during the next monitoring period. So some of the key policies that are working as intended, which have got a green rating, include the following. So we've had 356 dwelling completions, 82 of those, 23% were affordable, slightly down on last year, which were 443, but not much. 6 of the 7 allocated housing sites now have permission. And as I said, Vinegar Hill should get permission during the next monitoring period, which is all good news. 2 of the strategic housing sites gained reserve matters approval. They're not counted in this year's monitoring because we counted them when they gained outline permission. But nevertheless, it's important to note that in this monitoring period. And 2 of the main village sites also gained permission at Devorden and Cross Ash. 9 market at Devorden and 6 affordable, and 3 market and 3 affordable at Cross Ash. The affordable housing policy targets, as outlined in policy S4 of the adopted plan, are generally being met in relation to permissions granted in the main towns, rural settlements, 7 sites in the villages. In terms of employment, we have a land bank of 40.16 hectares remaining, and we've had some employment permissions granted for a range of B use classes, totaling 1.14 hectares over that monitoring period. A number of rural diversification and enterprise schemes have also been approved. I think there's around 15 in total. And good news in terms of tourist accommodation schemes, with 17 approved, ranging from holiday lets, hotels to glamping accommodation. So they're the main green ratings that we've recorded this year. And Craig's going to now talk about town centres and housing delivery.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Chair. Yes, so in terms of our town centres and our vacancy rates, which is how we monitor our town centres, we didn't have any red ratings. So in terms of our monitoring of our areas, we didn't have anything which was showing up significant concern with our town centres. It's worth noting this obviously is the period 2019 to 2020 of April of this year. So there would have been some implications from the pandemic ongoing, but this is a line in the sand from April this year. So vacancy rates in the county's central shopping areas range from 6.6 in Abergavenny to 15.3 in Usk. The average in Great Britain is 12.1. And vacancy rates in sensitive Caldecott 7.6, Chepstow 11.2, and Usk was 15.3, and they've all decreased since the previous monitoring period. So that's really, really positive. Raglan staying at the same level, but in those 3 areas, Caldecott, Chepstow, and Usk, the vacancy rates did decrease. Vacancy rates in Abergavenny and Monmouth and Mega have risen. However, this is a bit out of date in terms of where we are with Mega at the moment. I think last week Mega seen particular improvements in terms of its vacancy rates, and there isn't any units there at this present time, so that will show up in next year's AMR. But obviously the pandemic is having significant implications for our economy and all of our town centres across Monmouthshire. We're fully aware that this is going to be need to addressed in the replacement local development plan. There is obviously a report going to council this week with a revised delivery agreement for that replacement plan, and as planning officers, we're certainly aware that we need to ensure that we have an adaptable and flexible policy framework for our town centres to ensure that we can use different types of uses in those areas. So there's been significant talk recently about moving away from town centres being an economic transactional place, but making it more of a social hub, so you can have agile working spaces and have different uses such as gyms and other social and healthcare institutions, which can draw and attract people into those town centre areas. So going forward, it's part of the replacement plan and to react and to ensure that our town centres are viable in the longer term, particularly after the pandemic. We certainly be looking for that sort of flexible approach to our planning policies. But at the moment, as I said, there's no red ratings with regards to our vacancy rates at the time of this AMR. Rachel, if you'd like to go to the next slide, please. So in terms of the red rating, in terms of what has been flagged as part of the monitoring process for the local development plan, it is the delivery of homes. So we are showing at the moment an undelivery of 1,469 dwelling completions, as 36.3% for the plan period. And I'll go through the figures with you at the moment. In this year's AMR, there are 2 new measuring tools, which is the average annual requirement and then the cumulative average annual requirement. But as I said, as we're all aware, this plan is going for a full revision, and we are developing a replacement local development plan because we aren't meeting the delivery of our housing figures. Right, so let's go to the next figure, the next screen. We'll be able to show the actual figures delivered. So the annual average annual requirement is the top figure, which is the line in green there, which shows that we should be delivering 450 dwellings, homes per year. And there's the total recorded completions are on the top there. So as you can see, going through from last year, we completed 356 dwellings against a target of 450. So we were 94 dwellings away from where we should have been. But as you can see, if you look back over the years, we are improving every year on year, and this is because those strategic sites are coming through. So we have, as Rachel has already expressed, we had Fairfield Maybe come through, we've had Crick Road come through, so there are a number of dwellings there which have got planning permission and are coming through the system, so those dwelling numbers are going up. I mean, back in 2014-15, the difference was 245. So since then, it has been slightly increasing. We had a really good year last year, with 2018-2019, which was 443, and again we've seen a higher level this year. So in terms of the cumulative requirement, which is the bottom measure, there you can see where the minus 1,469 has come from, because over the time period of the plan, although the number of dwellings are going up, we're still not hitting that overall target, which is exactly the reason why we're in a situation where we are developing a replacement local development plan. But if you'd like to go to the next graph, this just shows visually these figures. So on this figure, you can see that there was a reduced percentage difference in 2015, 2016, and then going up then towards 1920, we are going up and reducing that percentage difference. So that is positive. We are getting those completions, but unfortunately, as we all know, we do need to develop a new replacement local development plan to address Monmouthshire's issues and objectives and to create a better housing figure. In terms of recommendations for the AMR, as Rachel has outlined, it's not a statutory requirement this year, because the Welsh Government have outlined that given what's happened with the pandemic, it didn't need to be submitted. However, in Monmouthshire, we did feel that it's the right thing to review how the LDP is working, and just for our own benefit, to ensure that we are looking at what is working and what isn't working, if we can use this data to inform the next replacement plan. So we're going to continue to work on the replacement local development plan, and the next stage of this involves non-statutory consultation on the growth and spatial options. This will be outlined further in the report, which is going to council on Thursday, the 22nd of October. We are looking to go backwards a stage, given that the impact of the pandemic, and also of the fact that Welsh Government have released new population projections, and the previous preferred strategy, which went out in March, was based on 2014 projections. Now that we have this new evidence base of the 2018 projections, we do think it's much more appropriate to base the growth levels on the most up-to-date evidence and on those population figures. So that will be outlined in the report, which goes to council this Thursday. We also propose to submit this 6th AMR to the Welsh Government by the 31st of October this month, in accordance with the statutory requirements. But as I said, it's not a statutory requirement this year. And we will continue to monitor the plan through the preparation of successive AMRs. So there'll be another AMR next year. And this is a recommendation for the committee today to note the contents of the 6th AMR for submission to the Welsh Government by the 31st of October and comment accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Craig and Rachel, for that very detailed presentation. Are there any questions from members, please, or comments? Councillor Strong? You're muted, Brian. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the report. It's clearly we're on an improving line. Just one or two things. As far as USC is concerned, I know that recently the number of shops have reopened, so possibly that 15.6 figure will reduce further. The one thing I noticed, it was under the last one bullet point, was you state, Craig, that ample land remains available for potential waste management sites. Now, as you probably know, we've had quite a tussle in Usk about the closure of the site, which is in the middle of Usk. Could you tell me whether there are any potential sites that are within this vicinity, or are they all elsewhere? Thank you.
Hello, sorry, Councillor.
Yes,
Is that come through?
Yeah,
Hear
you're
me?
coming through.
In terms of what the local development plan needs to deliver, there is enough space and enough adequate size. I mean, that with regards to the site in itself, I mean, that is a decision for the council, isn't it, rather than discussing in this forum. But in terms of the amount of waste management sites we do have enough to meet our requirement. So we wouldn't need to be allocating more. But again, we will be reviewing this as part of the replacement local development plan. So going forward, this will all be need to looked at and reviewed again, make sure that we have got enough and we are sustainable in terms of meeting our own requirements. So this is something that we will be looking going forward. At the moment, we do seem to have enough. And with regards to particular sites, I'm sorry, I'm not particularly in tune with exactly where those sites are. But obviously, at the moment, we're meeting that requirement, and it's certainly something that we'll be reviewing as part of the replacement plan.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions or comments from members? Councillor Roden?
Thank you. We had a deluge in parts of Monmouthshire in October 2019 and in February 2020. I wonder if there was any adverse impact on housing completion rate during that period, because obviously in Monmouth we had a lot of problems. Just wondering if this actually impacted on completions, if there's any data on that. Thank you.
I'm not aware on specific data on that, Councillor Roden, but undoubtedly it would have had an implication in terms of the number of houses that were being built. I mean, the site down in Kingswood in Monmouth is pretty much complete now, actually. So they'll be leaving the site soon. So they have almost completed that site, but it would have had an impact, no doubt, in terms of development. But whether it was significant, given the limited time span of those flooding events, wouldn't know. But I'd have to do a piece of work with regards to the developers to look at that. But in terms of Kingswood in Monmouth, that's coming along great and is almost finished now. So, I mean, we could look at that. I think that's something that we could look at. But I think given the limited span of the flooding, it wouldn't have had a significant plan over the plan period. I don't think it's.
I presume that if there is a delay in completions, it will show up in this year's figures anyway, so it will be captured. All right, thank you very much, Craig.
Any other questions from members? Craig, I got a few, not questions so much, but comments to make. You spoke about the impact of the virus and on the business economy. I just wondered whether there was any data, current data, for businesses that have had to close or make people redundant within Monmouthshire as a result of what's happening at the moment. And the other thing was, you mentioned, we're lacking the amount of affordable housing that we require. I just wonder whether we have plans in the short term to increase that number of affordable houses within the developments that are going on. And of course, we've got a development of Church Road in Caldicot, which wasn't part of that LDP process. I think there's 115 houses or something like that. Can you give us an update on what's happening there, please?
Yes, sure. I think Mark Hand wanted to come in here, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, if that's okay, Chair. In terms of the first question about the economic impacts of COVID, we haven't got any of that data at this stage yet. It's too soon. I think probably the initial impacts have been relatively limited because there's been a lot of grant funding available, other things such as the furlough scheme. I think probably, this is just me, my opinion here, but I think probably the real impacts will be seen in the coming months, where either companies can't apply for those grants, or the furlough scheme is ending and those impacts start to bite. So it's a little bit too soon at the moment. Interestingly, we've actually seen some benefits in some of our settlements. Mega in particular has been in the press. So in some places, we're really finding that more people working from home means more people are shopping locally, which is to be expected. Is kind of the opposite to the argument that's been put out that people should return to the cities to support the shops there and the businesses. We're reaping the benefits from the fact they're staying at home. So Mega's now got 0 vacancies. It's had 5 new businesses open in a relatively short period of time. I think Councillor Strong mentioned fewer vacancies in Usk. Others are not looking so healthy, so Monmouth's a bit of a concern at the moment. But we know we're working up with the businesses, with the grants that are available, and those incentives. But there's something we're definitely going to have to look at in the new LDP. The role of the high streets changed. We know that. We talked about that before. Internet shopping's increased. So if we do have more people working from home, we can encourage people to shop locally and support those local businesses. I think that in itself will have probably the biggest impact. And then making sure those high street environments are fit for purpose and inviting places, which is some of the work that we started trying to do, creating some opportunities, I think, from the COVID period. In relation to the other question,
in relation to town centres, you mentioned, and Craig mentioned, you know, that the traditional use of town centres is changing, and we need to look at them more as areas where people come to be entertained as much as a shop. What can we do as an authority in terms of encouraging the right sort of development within those town centres? So, you know, have we got a vision of what a sustainable town centre would look like in terms of our current town centres, and what do we need to put in them to make that happen?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to do. Part of it relates to the policy framework. So at the moment, we have a policy framework that concentrates retail uses on the central shopping area on a core, and then we've got a primary area and then a secondary. So we could look at simplifying that. I think in the next plan we'll look at reducing the retail core area anyway and freeing up uses on the periphery. But we haven't got any evidence at the moment that planning policies themselves are a problem. Where people are coming in for things, almost all of the time we're supporting them. I think there's one recent example in Monmouth where we didn't, but otherwise we have been supporting those different uses, and it's trying to get that mix. I think historically our focus has been on retail, so we'd want a high proportion of retail uses in the core, and we're stricter on things like cafes. I think that's the bit that's really fundamentally changing. So it's more about going out, having leisure time. Cafes and restaurants, I think, will become a bit more prevalent. What we're talking about and seeking some agreement on is the extent to which we could have those policies perhaps more hooked into the LDP, but the details in supplementary guidance, because that means we can be more fleet of foot to change them as circumstances change. We just don't know the long-term impacts of COVID or even internet shopping to some extent. So the more flexibility we've got in changing those LDP policies as time goes by, the better. Some of the answer though is around the physical environment. So you'll know from press coverage probably and from work on the high streets for reopening with COVID, there's been some real challenges around that, real opportunities, and it's trying to get that perfect balance between pedestrian areas. I don't mean pedestrianisation necessarily, just wider footpaths, a more pleasant environment. Some of the smaller measures like the planters have been really well received, and a bit more space for people, but that does mean less space for cars, and it's trying to get that balance between people wanting to park right outside the shop, loading areas right outside the shop, the businesses supporting that, but not having a completely car dominated environment. So yeah, there's probably Abergavenny's worked really well in that sense, but there's a very long history to getting Abergavenny to that position with the pedestrianisation before. So I think those kind of steps have been laid well before this project, and this one's been relatively simple. Monmouth's been beset with a few issues. kind of beyond the project, but have all contributed together. But there's some real opportunities for Mono Street potentially. Just got to kind of reset really and get the evidence and the data and plan it out. But I think it's very much going to be about creating a more people-friendly environment than car dominated. But we have to acknowledge, people need to get around, and there is a demand for that parking space and loading space right by the shops. Just trying to get that combination.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
In terms of the other questions, Chair, if Craig and I double up potentially with the housing sites, if you can answer a bit about affordable housing and extra delivery potential, just in terms of delivery, full stop. I thought the figures that Craig presented on and Rachel presented on were interesting. Probably what's worth noting is the house builders tend to deliver between 40 and 45 homes per outlet, so per sales centre. So what's driving the increase in delivery on the ground is having more planning permissions. To achieve that 450 per annum target, in effect, we need 10 sales outlets up and running at any time. So bearing in mind that for the new LDP, it really is about a range of sites and a number of sites. A lot of councils will be talking about developers land banking, sites not coming forward for viability reasons. We genuinely haven't got those reasons. We haven't got those problems, which is brilliant. And on the whole, as soon as those permissions are approved and developers have got the other highways agreements and legal niceties in place, they're off. And you can see that from the latest site in Undy, which is developing at pace, and where you asked a question about Church Road. So I'll get Craig to give an update on that now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, with Church Road, as you're aware, Chair, that was an allocated site within which we supported, which is outside of the local development plan. So this was a policy that the council did develop to try and support providing affordable housing across the county. So we did set up a number of ground rules to bring these sites forwards to try and address some of these issues of in terms of meeting our housing completions to deliver affordable housing. So that Church Road site was allowed for 130 houses and 45 affordable units, so 35%. And that development has started on site now, so that work is underway, and that sits outside of the LDP provision, so that is on top and not sort of calculated within the LDP. But that was allowed, as well as another site within Monmouthshire, because of this deficit in terms of us meeting this requirement, and to build homes for people who are in need and are on the waiting list. As I've said many times, the 2,021 people on the waiting list, and that's not today's figure, might have actually increased by now, but there are people out there who are in desperate need of a home, and we need to address that. And that going forward with the replacement local development plan, that's certainly what we will be looking to address. This is one of our key issues that needs to be reviewed. But that Church Road site was an unallocated site. Unfortunately, the Welsh Government have given us quite clear guidance through a decision at Raglan, and also via correspondence, that the Welsh system is certainly going to be plan led, and sites need to be allocated within the plan to be supported. Therefore, it's unlikely that we would be able to support unallocated sites going forward, even though we did feel it was a proactive way to address some of the issues and deliver some affordable housing. Unfortunately, given where we are with replacing the plan and reviewing the plan at the moment, it's unlikely that we'd be able to support other unallocated sites. But going forward, certainly this is a significant issue for Monmouthshire. It's a significant issue that we need to deliver on. And as Mark has just touched on, we don't have the same sort of viability issues as some other councils and neighbouring authorities. And therefore, we do feel that what PPW is outlining, that we need to build 110,000 homes in Wales by 2040. And there is a target that essentially 48% of those could be affordable. So there's some high targets and there's some high figures, and going forward we would be seeking to go towards the higher levels really to deliver on. So that's all it needs to be reviewed going forward.
Okay, thank you, Craig. I mean, from my perspective, this new LDP needs to be as ambitious as it can possibly be. it does take time, considerable amount of time, and of course we've got those people in that position you spoke about waiting at the moment. So it's unfortunate, I think, that we can't look at other sites. But if that's the way things are, that's the way things are. But I would hope that obviously we do everything we can to produce that affordable housing and housing in general, and also that we really need to have a vision for what business we're looking to attract and the sites that we have available within this LDP, and it's that vision really that I'm looking for, and obviously we need to do it as soon as we can. But thank you very much for your presentation. Very good. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions from members? No? The next item on the agenda then is the annual performance report for the planning service. Craig, are you, or is it Philip?
It's me. Yes, Phil.
Thank you, Philip.
Phil acts today. Craig will chip in when he needs to. Okay, I'll just share my screen and go through the presentation with you. Can everyone see that?
Yes, Phil.
Yep. Okay. Great. I'll help if I. No, it's not working anyway. And can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. Right. So this is the annual performance report, which looks at the performance of the planning service against nationally set performance indicators by Welsh Government. And it looks at our performance against the Wales average over the year. We've had to change things slightly. It's not actually a mandatory requirement this year to submit the APR because of COVID, similarly to the AMR. But so we haven't got the data from Welsh Government in which to make a fair comparison with our performance over 2019-20 compared to what the Welsh average. So we've had to compare our own performance. We have got the data for our own performance against the Welsh average for the previous year, 2018-19. That's the best we can do, really, in terms of comparing it. We think it's appropriate to do it this year, despite not being a requirement from Welsh Government, as a useful learning exercise to see where we are, rather than not so much resting on our laurels, but to move forward and improve the performance of the team over 2020-21. So it is what it says. It sets our challenges in the context of where we are in terms of opportunities, priorities, resources, including staffing, financial budgets that are available to us. And its aim is to reflect on and celebrate good performance and identify areas for improvement, looking across Wales to identify potential areas of best practice. That's obviously been more difficult this year because we haven't got that data from Welsh Government. That Monmouthshire should learn from and share with others. So it's divided into sections, which is set out by Welsh Government, consistent throughout Wales, and it normally compares. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Can everyone hear me clearly? I can hear an echo in my headphones. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, I'll carry on then. That's fine.
Okay.
The report looks at where the planning service sits corporately, how we are structured, and how it fits in with corporate priorities, local pressures, customer feedback. Again, that's not been forthcoming this year because there's normally a survey done, and performance. And performance is analysed across the 5 key aspects of the planning service delivery as set out in what we call the planning performance framework, which I'll come to later. So it's normally set out into plan making, then efficiency of the service, quality of outcomes and decisions, how we engage, how well do we engage, and enforcement at the end. So these are all standard measures. So as I've said, it's not mandatory this year due to the COVID-19 outbreak. We've prepared one voluntarily as a useful tool to see how we're performing. Owing to absence of the data from Welsh Government in relation to performance over 2019-20, The plan making element itself has been omitted, but we feel that that's obviously been aired and covered really well in the annual monitoring report that you've just gone through with Rachel, Craig and Mark, which is also being submitted to Welsh Government in October 2020. So we've omitted the plan making element of this, and we focused really on the development management section of the planning service. So in terms of what we do in the annual performance report, we do reflect back on what we said we do in the previous reporting period. And over 2018-19, the annual performance report identified 4 key actions that we said we'd do. So in terms of action 1, this was to complete the review of the effectiveness of the Council's bespoke pre-application advice service, and we would roll out the use of planning performance agreements where appropriate. So we run our own pre-application advice service. There's a statutory one that Welsh Government ask us to provide if applicants wish to go down the statutory service. We don't think that's a particularly great way of doing things. For instance, there's no site visit or meeting involved in that. It's purely a desktop exercise. And we provide our own bespoke service which is more engaging, we think, with the public. You can have a meeting, you can draw in internal consultees like highways, countryside, rights of way, and so on, environmental health where necessary, who would then also get a share of the fee that the applicant pays. So we think that's a better, holistic, more comprehensive service. And we came up with that service by asking our customers in the past what they wanted. So we reviewed that. We came up with some changes, including actually changing the fee for our level 2 pre-application advice, which is for things like single plots, smaller housing schemes, which was actually a lot lower than the statutory service. So we thought we'd need to increase that to actually align a little bit more with the statutory service, especially as it did involve more work for us and included site meetings and bringing in our own internal consultees. We also reviewed how we were performing, and the summary was that the conclusion was that it was working well, and the APR sets out the performance figures of how many we had, which was well over 400. 98% of those were approved in generally less time than it would take to submit an application that hadn't gone through pre-app advice. And the only 1 or 2 applications that didn't go through were actually, the applicant was advised that the scheme was unacceptable at the outset. So we did actually deliver what we said in terms of the outcome, but they still went ahead with submitting the planning application. So it's a useful tool for smoothing the way for a planning application. In terms of action 2, we wanted to continue to improve our web pages to deliver relevant, accessible and legible information so that customers can self-serve. That was going to involve investigating the value of a chatbot to signpost users to information held online. But a lot of work was done to actually improve the web pages in terms of the content, accessibility of it, the clarity of it. The online payment system was improved. We did quite a lot of work on that. With the chatbot, there is a certain amount of work we did on it, but it has a cost attached to it. So we will continue to look at that, but that's not something we've decided on delivering. There are other options I think we can do, which are included in the actions for this year's plan, which we feel will actually help the service to manage customers' expectations better at this stage than a chatbot. But that's not to say that we won't actually look at bringing in a chatbot in due course. I think the complication of the planning process and the number of diverse questions we get means that the chatbot would have to be very sophisticated really to help serve customers. So, but it's not off the table. It's certainly something that we will be looking at. And in terms of action 3, that was reviewing a thorough root and branch review of the planning services enforcement function to speed up decision making. Again, that's a matter that's it's in progress. We haven't finished that. It's improved dramatically over the last year, which you'll see in the figures, but that is kept as an ongoing action. But we have put lots of milestones and measures in there to help improve the turnaround and outcomes for customers. and to speed up the way we investigate enforcement cases. And in terms of action 4, to continue to pursue an agenda of collaboration in relation to heritage services with neighbouring authorities, and collaboration in other areas where possible, including the evidence base for the review of the LDP. We do work as much as we can, really, with other local authorities where we can. And in terms of heritage, we've also entered into a service to provide into a memorandum of understanding to provide heritage services to Blaenau Gwent Council as well. That started over the last year as well, and that's going very well. The main work is with Torfaen, because as you imagine, it's a bigger authority with more listed building and heritage assets, but that's going very well, and that's been extended by another year in terms of its contract with them. So how did we do over 2019-20? So based on the performance, which is in the report, we can be very pleased with the service. So during this period, the proportion of major applications determined within 8 weeks or agreed timescales increased and was well above the 80% target and substantially above the Welsh average. The average time taken to determine applications has reduced significantly from 86 days, that's all applications, so major and all minor ones. So from 86 days in the previous period to 70 days in 2019-20, so it's quite a significant improvement. Number of applications we determined slightly increased by just under 3%. That was just over 1,100 applications over that year. And the proportion of applications we approved remained high at 97%, which again shows our ethos that we'd rather negotiate a positive outcome than get an applicant to withdraw an application or refuse it before the 8 weeks, just as the 8 weeks is about to expire, and make them resubmit with an amendment, which we could have negotiated in the first place, and you get a speedier outcome at the end of it. So of those applications that have gone through our pre-application advice service, which I mentioned earlier, 98% were approved. So again, the only one, I think, or two which didn't follow our advice. So again, that shows our pre-application advice service is working very effectively. And we dealt with a large number of applications for listed building consent, 54 applications, and 84% of those were approved within agreed timescales, despite some of those being quite complex. And enforcement performance improved markedly over the year, which I'll go into in terms of the figures in a moment. So this is the performance framework. It's a traffic light system. So it's based on the red measure, which is where the measure needs to improve. The fair measure, which is the sort of in between, which is amber, and then a good measure, which is that we're performing well, and there's not seen to be a need to improve that particular measure. So the column on the right-hand side is one to look at. So it's Monmouthshire, how it performed in 2019-20, and the good news is there's lots of greens there. There actually aren't any red measures. The table continues on the next slide with the enforcement measures, but they're virtually all green, and there's a couple of ambers. So where we perform fairly, but there is a need for us to get towards the good measure. The Welsh average is the third column from the right, and how we performed last year is the second column from the right. So you can see we're doing very well. I won't go through all of those. But I'll point out some of the highlights. The percentage of appeals dismissed was very encouraging. You can see it was red, the measure before, in 2018-19. We're now up to 86%. I think it's 12 out of 14 appeals were dismissed. So that's good. Some of those were member decisions as well. It's difficult to analyse precisely why that measure's improved quite dramatically. We'd like to think that in some ways the placemaking agenda is making a difference, from Planning Policy Wales 10 being published, and the Planning Inspectorate in some ways is making decisions that are a little bit better considered. I think the rule of thumb before for something to be acceptable was, is it good enough? But I think now, is it making a place? is it actually a good development, a high quality development? And so I think the bar has risen in terms of appeal decision making, and we can see that from the support we're now getting from the Planning Inspectorate. And the percentage of all applications determined within time periods required, 91%. That's gone up from the previous year as well, from 88%. So that's all good. I just make a note of where perhaps we didn't do quite so well. It's in the major applications in terms of days and turnaround. It was a remarkably low figure in 2018-19, probably artificially low. We did have quite a lot of major applications in 2019-20, and some of those were long-standing applications. For instance, you'll remember the Dixton Roundabout application, the application also at the Job Centre in Abergavenny, which had involved years literally of negotiation to try and resolve problems. In both cases, neither applicant wanted to withdraw their applications. They wanted an outcome. So we could have forced the hand a little bit more and got them to withdraw it. But bearing in mind the customer service ethos that we have and the desire to actually see something through, we determined those applications. They were both ironically refused. One due to the one in the Job Centre was refused due to at the 11th hour us finding that they'd actually let the building for employment purposes, so it wasn't appropriate to then approve it for residential use because it had a viable employment use. And then the one at Dixton Roundabout, we waited and waited, but the information in relation to drainage wasn't submitted, and the scheme was also unacceptable in terms of retail impact, so they were both refused. So they artificially skew that figure up towards a much higher figure than it should be. So it'll be interesting to see how that performs next year. We'll keep an eye on that one. And as mentioned in the previous slide, the use of planning performance agreement should be a good tool to help us manage major and complex planning applications. We've rolled two of those out, one at Fairfield Maybe, and the other at Church Road, Caldicot, which were really good project management tools to try and engage with the applicant, get information in at certain stages, and mark in milestones and things like committee dates that we would try to commit to project manage it as effectively as we can, bringing down the end-to-end times for those planning applications, which are admittedly complex and difficult to manage. And then the last measures are the enforcement measures. These were quite they were the red measures last year of 2018-19. So we needed to try and work on that via our action. And you can see there's been a marked improvement on both of those measures, rising from 75% of enforcement cases investigated within 84 days. We'd like to get that up towards the 80% to get it to good. And then the average time to take positive enforcement action reduced from 232 days by almost 100 days, 142 days, by 90 days, sorry, yeah. So that came down dramatically again, but we'd like to reduce that as well via further case monitoring. So those are the ones we improved. I've been through some of those already. Including the appeals, applications determined within agreed timescale. You can see on the slide, the average time to determine all applications in days fell from 86 to 70, and ideally we'd like to get that down to green as well. But next year is going to be slightly challenging in that we'll have got all the main impacts of COVID on our service. So some of the measures I think won't improve next year. It'll be a whole different ball game in terms of performance improvement over 2020-21. But actually, our first quarter figures weren't actually bad at all. They were quite good, but it remains to be a challenge next year. And we improved, as said, on the two enforcement measures, which I mentioned had gone to amber, from red to amber. So there's various activity that we're going to be that we did over 2018-19, including the review, the replacement LDP, upgrading our planning application database. So a lot of this work goes on in the background that the public doesn't see, but the public benefits from in terms of making us more resilient and making our systems efficient so we can process planning applications more effectively. Things like the digital plan, improving the web pages, providing information on our pre-app services and other services we provide, and GDPR processes were improved in terms of the web pages. Yeah, so all that sort of work is going on in the background, including things like cross-department working on Section 106 agreements and working with neighbouring authorities, as said, in terms of collaboration on heritage and policy areas. So in terms of what we're doing this year, we've got 4 actions. So action 1 is to, if you remember, I mentioned the chat bot, and we felt there's probably areas which would deliver more immediate improvements and savings for us in terms of time and demand from the public. This area is one of those. Digitise information in relation to woodland tree preservation order work to help customers self-serve and reduce the significant demand on the planning services tree officer, the daily duty officer and support staff. I think you'd be really surprised how many queries we get about tree preservation orders. People either concerned that the neighbour is doing something to a tree, or people wanting to find out if they've got a tree preservation order in their garden. We get an incredible amount of inquiries about that. A lot of that information wasn't digitised. It was in paper form, so it was creating a lot of wasted work for our colleagues. So we're actually sorting all that out and getting that all digitised so that people can self-serve without necessarily having to call us and ask us about it. In terms of action 2, we want to upgrade our planning application processing software to make sure that it will be resilient and provide enhancements to our customers and ensure better GDPR compliance. We need to do that because the current system will be de-supported, so that's something that we have to do occasionally from year to year. Can you all hear me? Sorry.
Yes, you, Phil.
It's telling me I've got bad network quality, but I'm not sure I have. Okay. So in terms of action 3, we're going to continue to review and make positive change to enforcement function, because we can see that's a work in progress, to speed up our decision making, ensuring we are providing a good service for our customers. So again, there are processes being put in place by the enforcement manager to make sure that our enforcement colleagues are actually hitting deadlines and making sure that certain actions are done within a certain amount of time for each case. And then in terms of 4, we're going to continue to review the collaboration arrangements in relation to heritage services with Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent. And importantly, we're going to develop a buildings at risk strategy to manage and prioritise any interventions to enable key heritage assets to realise a sustainable use for future generations. So you'll all know of buildings in your areas which are probably at risk. I know Councillor Brian Strong will be familiar with at least 2 in his area. And we're going to try and set up a risk register and strategy so that we can prioritise cases, because we can't do everything. We can't do them all. We can see from Caerwent House how involved that was in terms of cost and resource to actually turn around, but we're seeing results there now. But we can try and put together a list of priorities where we want to intervene and actually take action. So that's the background with that one. And the last slide is just to really put in perspective what we do in terms of trying to monitorise how the planning service helps its communities. So the value of planning was a toolkit put together by the Royal Town Planning Institute Wales, try and help publicise the work that planning does in their communities and provide a value against that. So in terms of jobs, land we allocate or safeguard in the LDP, in terms of our decision making, the permissions granted for residential, commercial use, retail, leisure, renewable energy, the contributions we receive from 106 monies, and the completions that actually happen, not just the permissions, the completions that happen on the ground each year, and enforcement work and wider measures are valued for each local authority. And we've updated the toolkit this year so that the value for 2019-20 is the big headline at the bottom of 115.2 million. So that's what the planning service provides through this sophisticated toolkit to provide, you know, an uplift, if you like, a value against how it improves its communities. So I'll leave you with that slide. But I would say the recommendation is to note the content of the 6th annual performance report for submission to Welsh Government by the 31st of October, but to invite comments from the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, for that very detailed report. I understand, Mark, you'd like to make a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was going to see if I'm coming after members, but now I'm mine. I just wanted to say, on a personal note, a massive thank you and congratulations to the team. It's a really good set of figures. Obviously, it's from last financial year, so not affected by COVID in this period. But you know, it's the first 6 months during that period of Craig's reign as head of planning. He's done a fantastic job, and he's come in at a really difficult time as well with the floods and then this. So I just wanted to say congratulations to him, congratulations to the team, and really well done. In the more recent months, the team's done a brilliant job, I think, in terms of dealing with COVID and everything that's thrown at them. So some different working arrangements to normal, trying to balance a continual stream of work, which hasn't really let up, with other things like childcare arrangements and all sorts. So they've just done brilliantly, and I wanted to just say thank you and well done to them all. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Can I say, as the chair of this committee, I concur with everything that Mark has said. I've had some dealings with the planning committee in these very difficult circumstances, and apart from the fact that we're not physically next to each other, the service has remained as good as it's always been, in my opinion. So congratulations to you all there. Are there any questions from members, please? Ryan Strong?
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Phil, for the report. Very comprehensive and a good report. It's just, you did mention the 2 buildings in Usk that have been problematic for about 10 years now. I know it's a difficult 2 difficult enforcement cases. I just wondered, you're going to put a risk register. I just wondered whether these 2 would be possibly near the top of the risk register, because the gatehouse in Usk, as you know, some years ago there were heavy stone slates falling from the roof, and the local junior school, a lot of children walk past that particular building. They've put a fence around it now, but it's and I don't think any slates have fallen for a while, but there is a sensor, I think, on a big crack that's developed in the wall there, and if that could be looked at, I'd be very much obliged. The other one is the White House in Usk. There's scaffold up around it, but I think they've gone as far as they need to, just to satisfy requirements. Anyway, if you could possibly get someone to keep an eye on those 2, I'd be very grateful. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Yeah, certainly, Councillor Strong should be more formal tonight. Okay. Yeah, certainly those are 2 that we're keeping a close eye on. It's finding a partner, I think, who can work with us to provide an economic value for the scheme afterwards, and a beneficial after use. That's why I think the tricky thing with the gatehouse maybe, but we certainly appreciate the condition it's in, and the need for restoration and remediation on it. So yeah, and the White House we're familiar with and have taken action about that. We served notices on that, but we'll if you're interested, we'll try and give you an update on where we are with those. I'll talk to Amy about those and see if we can give you an update on progress in both of those cases.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. That'll be great. Thank you.
Councillor Roden?
Thank you, Chair. In a similar vein to Councillor Strong, I'd like to congratulate the Planning Department for an excellent report. And also in a similar vein, we have an issue in Mono Street, which you'll be familiar with, 22A Mono Street. And I'd like to just make sure that that's at the forefront of your minds and list if possible. All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Excellent.
We hear that, and we'll check on progress on that again, and yeah, give you an update.
Thank you,
Okay, thanks,
Councillor Roden. Are there any other questions from members? No. Phil, I've got not a question, but a comment really. In terms of appeals that go to the Welsh Government, I mean, we've done very well there. You know, we've improved our performance considerably there. But in terms of those that we lost at appeal, do we actually analyse the reasons for those and build that into? As a member of the planning committee, I'm quite interested to know, you know, with those appeals that we lose, are we learning lessons from those ones we've lost?
Yes, we should be. We do report those all to planning committee, whether they've been involved members or not. So that's something we try to do. All appeals are reported to planning committee. We also raise them at planning liaison meetings to talk through with the case officers. So that's something we do, or the development management team meeting, depending on which forum is more appropriate. So yeah, we do try and learn from those. I'm trying to think which two we lost. I haven't got those to hand. If members like an update on that, I can provide details of those that we did lose over that year to see. I can do a small analysis on that if members are interested.
Well, I'd certainly be interested, Phil, because it's good. I think it's good for as a planning committee member to know why the inspector felt that it should be overturned.
Without going through the whole APR report, it could be in there what they were, but I haven't got that immediately to hand. But I'll dig that information out and send it to members.
Thank you, Phil. Craig, did you want to comment?
Yeah, sorry, on mute then. I was just going to say, Councillor Davis, we could probably do a special at the end of one of the planning committees on that, just to review maybe of the last 12 months, just to look at some of the lessons learned. It's certainly something we do as officers. We have a committee debrief at the end of the week, and we at the end of the month, sorry, having a debrief from planning committee, and also look at the appeals. So maybe we could do something of an annual review as part of planning committee. I'll put that towards the chair and see if that's something that she would like to do. But I think that would have some value actually. And just to pick up on some of the heritage aspects in terms of the buildings at risk, one of those appeal decisions might be linked to that in terms of Troy House. It's one that we as a planning committee, we try to get a development there to enable development and to save the building, but unfortunately Welsh Government the planning inspector didn't agree with our proposals for that. So in terms of building and risk, that would certainly be one of those ones on there as well. So it's just worth mentioning that yes, all of these buildings do have their own risks, and I think we need to look at them all together and then set out strategies. Like I said, that's certainly something that I'm really passionate about, is ensuring that we protect our characteristic buildings in Monmouthshire and retain our heritage assets. Is something that we need to do to remind us what Monmouthshire is all about. So yes, so we can do both of those things, is what I'm saying, Councillor Davis. That's absolutely fine. And then for me, it's just I want to say a bit of a thank you as well, as Mark has said, to the team. Special reference to Phil and Andrew in terms of the enforcement figures going up, and really good work there. And we want to keep that going forward. So thank you very much. In terms of process, Councillor Davis, is it okay if we can just confirm that the committee is happy for us to send on both the AMR and the annual monitor and the APR to Welsh Government by the end of this month, just to clarify that point? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I was just about to do that. Right, are there any other questions from members? No? Well, if there's not, congratulations to all the team, because I think you've done an excellent job again this year. And as a Economy and Development Select Committee, our task was to scrutinise those reports and recommend them whether they go forward or not. I'm happy to recommend and move that they move forward. Are all the other members happy with that?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much then, and thank you officers for your input. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda now, which is the Economy and Development Forward Work Programme. I think that's really the note, but as Hazel said earlier, procurement is one item I think that the chair is very keen to pursue. So we need to make sure that that's on the forward work programme, Hazel.
Yes, Chair. I think you were going to ask Mark as well about the LDP workshops.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me. Mark, I was going to ask you about the LDP workshops and update on where we're going with that.
I was just trying to get my buttons back onto this screen. I was literally about to message you and Hazel to ask if that could be brought up. As Craig mentioned, the LDP timetable is changing. That's going to council later this week, but we'd then like to resurrect the workshops. I think Craig mentioned that we need to look at the growth options again because of the population data. So we did a workshop on that previously. So we'd like to do the same to brief members on the new options. And then there's a whole raft of outstanding workshops that we want to pick up with you. So Craig and Rachel are working on a timetable. So we'll get that finalised and to Hazel, and we'll get those back in the diary. It'd be interesting to know if the 5 o'clock Monday evening slot still works for this committee. They've always been hosted by this committee, but with an open invite to members. So it'd be helpful to know if that works. Thanks.
Councillor Roden?
I find that the Monday slot is actually the most difficult of the week. There may be other councillors with town council responsibilities who have meetings virtually every Monday. I'm unsure, but we certainly do in Monmouth, and that makes it very difficult to attend. Okay, thanks.
Ask is very similar to Richard's. We have, well, I have about two meetings a month, not every Monday, but 2 Mondays a month are occupied elsewhere.
Chair, I agree with what's been said with the meetings on Monday at 5 o'clock. As we're in this situation now with the virus, is there any reason we can't have them earlier in the day?
Mark, would you like to comment there?
No, there's no reason. I mean, most members who work are still working, as far as I'm aware. Probably in a different way to normal, but they'll still have those job commitments during the day. It sounds like 5 o'clock, but on a different day might be a better solution for the members that have spoken.
Yeah, I think our chair, when we discussed this topic before, because there were a few people that weren't happy, I think our chair said, well, we agreed to 5 o'clock, and that's what we were going to stay with for the time being. So I think 5 o'clock is okay for a majority of people. The day seems to be the issue, Mark.
Would it be possible to ask the members which would be the best day, and to work with the largest number that can accommodate the day that you choose?
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. I'll pick that up with Hazel.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, members. The next item on the agenda is the Council and Cabinet work plan to be noted. And the next item is to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting. I think we had that as a supplementary item. Are there any matters arising or details of accuracy that anybody wants to raise there?
I propose that we
take them as read.
Yep.
Okay, everybody happy there?
Yeah.
And the next item, Hazel, is to confirm the date and time of the next meeting.
Yes, Chair. There might be workshops in between. It depends on the schedule, but yes, I think that's it, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Good meeting, I think. Quite a lot of scrutiny there. I'd like to say, in relation to the new LDP, I think it's vital for the future of this county, actually, that we get it right. And therefore, I think, on a personal basis, I'd like to know a lot more about what's going on and what the thoughts are, because we really need to have a vision for where we want to go. And, you know, in terms of business particularly, we need to have those targets that we are looking to get to come into the county. We know we're not going to get massive investment because a lot of that's going to be put in other areas. But I think we really need to look at what the opportunities are, and I'm still very confident that, you know, we need an ambitious plan, but we have a lot going for us, and we need to make sure that we make the most of it. So unless there's anything else anybody would like to say, Mark, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If you don't mind me doing a quick plug now, you might be aware we're doing a review of car parking for the county, which is going to be done as a joint select committee meeting. The first one is scheduled in for the 2nd of November. So just to make you and the committee aware of that, so it'll be of interest to this committee.
Okay, thank you, Mark. If there are no other comments, then members and officers, thank you for your input.
Sorry, Chair. Could I just ask Mark if it's a morning or afternoon or evening meeting for the meeting you were just discussing? Thanks.
I'm just checking my diary now. I'm pretty certain it's the morning of the 2nd, although if Hazel's on the call. I've got it as 10 o'clock on Monday the 2nd in my diary. Is that correct, Hazel?
I haven't got any details for that, Mark. It's news to me, so we'll check that outside of the meeting. Thanks.
Okay. There's no other comments, and thank you for your participation, and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting when our leader will be back. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Well chaired.
Thank you, Alan, and
Bye.
everyone. Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.